There has been an almost endless supply of clone hardware for Sega's 16-bit system, the Genesis and the Mega Drive. The quality of these devices is of course all over the place, as is pricing and features. Some of them are real turds, having the audacity to charge a pretty penny for their brand of castration. In late 2018, Analogue announced that it would be doing its own take on Sega's 16-bit platform. Dubbed the Mega SG, it would bring FPGA hardware and claims of 100% accuracy into the mix, a first for a clone of the Genesis. Analogue was not to be easily dismissed here, as they had been doing fine work bringing both the NES and Super Nintendo similar machines to much critical and commercial success. Hell, I even remember their MVS Neo Geo machines from years back, which were stunning wood-grain consoleized beauties themselves. Being the Sega fan that I am, I took these claims seriously and was really excited for the end product. For years, the Genesis and Mega Drive platform has been absolutely defamed by poor releases in this area. Even the stuff Sega officially licensed was often incredibly inept representations of the once mighty brand. I wasn't just looking forward to this out of curiosity, but more hoping that finally, this incredibly important and deserving platform would be getting the treatment it truly deserved. The first thing you'll notice about the Mega SG when you hold it is its weight, well-made plastic, and just overall excellent build quality. Unlike previous clone machines, this thing isn't a hollow, weightless, poorly constructed toy. Analogue set out to build you a modern Sega Genesis, and in that, they have succeeded and then some. Looking at the ports on it, you have the power and reset buttons side by side, 2 controller ports up front with a headphone jack, an extension port for the Sega CD, a USB power port and HDMI out on the back, and of course your SD card slot for upgrading the firmware. The box also includes an adapter for the Sega Master System and a spacer for use with the Sega CD. Cartridges fit the slot nicely with just a little jiggle, and even the oddball Japanese carts like Batman fitting with no issues at all. If Analogue does add 32X support in the future, it will need to come via another add-on itself, as 32X carts do not fit in the unit by default. When connecting to the Sega CD, be it Model 1 or Model 2, the spacer raises the Mega SG just enough to fit evenly into the slot. It's a snug fit though, so be careful taking it apart. Powering it up for the first time, you'll be met with the Analogue logo and a few starting options. I highly recommend you visit the Analogue support site and download the latest firmware before you do anything else. You'll be needing it for additional features and proper support of Genesis and Master System games. The Run cartridge option is pretty self-explanatory. This is how you start the game you currently have inserted. The Tools options lead you to the Game Genie style cheat code interface, and Controller Test allows you to see if your D-pad and buttons are all being recognized by the hardware. Choosing Settings will get you into the meat of the options. Here you can set different settings for the video, audio, system preferences, and save these settings should you so desire. Remember that not saving your settings will mean that when the power is cycled, it will go back to whatever it was set to beforehand. Jumping into the video settings will give you your expected options. You can choose your resolution, you can set the size and position of the screen, you can set scaling options to add smoothness to sprites and backgrounds, as well as add those fake scan lines that have never looked good to my eyes. Extra features will allow you to mask the borders that are usually associated with Genesis games, and there is even a dither blending option to try and smooth out certain graphical effects, like pseudo-transparencies. But I found its usefulness to really depend on the game. The buffer options are here to eliminate screen tearing, though I have only seen it a few times in the fastest games towards the bottom of the screen. I advise leaving this on 0 lag, unless you encounter a game where tearing is a legitimate issue. There's even a color option that allows you to mess around with the levels if you want. The biggest issue you usually find with any clone hardware is the audio replication, and the Mega SG comes with some solid audio options to help contend with this. You have your headphone settings that give you the ability to adjust volume and levels. channel levels and panning for you guys really wanting to mess around with the output in detail, and even the ability to swap right and left outputs for some reason. The three big settings here that need your attention are enable cartridge and CD audio, which for some reason is off by default. You'll need this on to play Sega CD games properly. Next is ladder effect depth, which some games may need adjusted to sound more accurate. Finally, there is YM2612 high quality mode, which may need to be cut on or off if a game sounds completely wrong. I'd leave these settings on their default levels with firmware 4.2 and only adjust them should you run across a game that really needs some variation. Your system settings are pretty basic. You can adjust the front end to the Mega SG, set your menu hotkeys, and you can set how you want the system to boot, either to the menu or directly to the cartridge. There's also a region setting based on the games you plan on using. I found the auto region setting didn't really work, and I still had to manually set the proper region if I used an import game. There's also a Force 3 button mode in here for those pesky games that hate 6-button pads. Finally, your LED options allow you to customize how your system LED is displayed. If you want to know which version of the firmware you are running, just hop into the About setting to see what you have. And again, don't forget to save your settings, otherwise you lose whatever you change after you power down. Now that I've bored you to death with the settings, let's get to the games and how the Mega SG performs playing some of the best games the 16-bit generation has to offer. Analogue made some lofty claims, and I have the hardware and the software to see if any of it is true. The first thing we will look at is the included built-in game Ultra Core. This is actually hardcore, the long-famed 99% complete yet unreleased game for the Mega Drive. It was developed by Digital Illusions, the guys behind True Pinball for the Sega Saturn. When its publisher backed out in 1994, it was left with no one to release it. A Sega CD version was in the works as well, its fate still in limbo. When you first start playing Ultra Core, the first thing that comes to mind is Contra. The run and gun gameplay is extremely similar, including the 8-way aiming mechanic. The graphics are pretty damn solid too, with great depth to its parallax scrolling and lots of little sprite explosion animations filling the screen. This one takes a particularly big turn once you get to the underground levels. There you will find dead ends, locked doors, elevators, and switches to throw, things that are very much un-Contra-like. You'll need to do a bit of exploring in this one, something that may or may not appeal to you. I haven't spent a ton of time with this one yet, but I can definitely tell that what I have played is far from a bad game, and definitely has elements to be pretty good. For a freebie pack-in, I'll definitely take it. Next up, I took a suite of my favorite Genesis games and gave it a good play to see how they fared on the Mega SG. First up is Sunsoft's classic platformer Batman, which looked and played great and sounded good. This one has an incredible soundtrack for such an early game, and while the Mega SG does it justice, some of the sounds are a little bit different from my reference Japanese Mega Drive. It's ever so slight and doesn't detract terribly, but it definitely has some tonal differences that hardcore fans are gonna pick up on. The good news is that the audio is crystal clear otherwise, and still drives that awesome gameplay perfectly. I'd be a damn fool not to put up some Streets of Rage goodness, and I put both 1 and 2 on to see how they sounded. The Mega SG performed great in both these games, really holding that techno beat solid and keeping up with some of the fast changes these soundtracks can bring. I was really happy to see it perform at this level with these games. Next up was Contra the Hardcore. This one is loaded with nice graphical effects and really intense gameplay, and again the Mega SG performs impressively. Gameplay incurs no lag I can feel, and she sported razor sharp visuals and great audio. No complaints here at all. I always felt that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Hyperstone Heist, or the Japanese variant here, Return of Shredder, was a great looking and sounding game. The Mega SG holds the line and again does an outstanding job reproducing the audio. I know I'm probably in the minority, but I love the eccentric music in Road Rash. It was so different from anything else at the time, and it just fit that game so well. The Mega SG keeps those weird tunes a-blastin' and does a very good job bringing us one of the Genesis' strangest soundtracks. You guys know I'm a Castlevania fan, so I had to bring out Bloodlines for a test. I could detect no variations here. This game is well represented on the Mega SG, and may even sound a tad bit better. Clone systems have always given me trouble with the original John Madden Football. The menu select is in hyperspeed and really tough to select your options. Unfortunately, the Mega SG also has this issue. A real shame, and something I hope they can fix. Revenge of Shinobi is a damn fine action game with an outstanding Yuzo Koshiro soundtrack. The Mega SG does a great job on the graphics and gameplay, and a good job on the sound. There are some slight tonal differences here, and the overall body of the sound isn't as full, deep, or robust as my referenced Japanese Mega Drive. Like Batman, it is crystal clear however, and still sounds pretty damn good. Bringing in Shinobi 3, I actually thought it sounded better on the Mega SG. It's clearer, and I swear sound effects like explosions have more depth to them. I really enjoyed how this one fared, and definitely think the Mega SG does it great. What about a great shooter soundtrack? Well, Thunder Force 4 sounds just fine on it, and all the beauty of those gorgeous layers of parallax scrolling never looked so bright and clear at 1080p. You gotta have some Mega Turrican in there, not just for its great music and sound effects, but also for its screen-filling explosions and great color. The Mega SG again performs admirably. Another game with music that is somewhat of an acquired taste is Golden Axe 2. It's no Revenge of Death Adder, but it was a solid game with good graphics and sound. The Mega SG plays it all back great. I wanted to make sure the Mega SG also would play back my extensive library of ROM hacks, so I loaded up Street Fighter Special Champion Edition with the voice fix and color enhancement. Everything played back flawlessly. I always loved Truxton's loud music and straightforward shoot-'em-up gameplay. The Mega SG again proves itself up to the task here. Echo Tides of Time is a game with a surprisingly robust soundtrack, and even this one I think may sound better on the Mega SG. A few games tend not to run the best on some clone machines, like Virtua Fighter 2 here. The Mega SG had no issues with it at all. The technical marvel Red Zone also fired right up with no issues. Sound and music were spot on. And finally there is the Sega virtual processor game Virtua Racing. It plays back as good as you could hope. It even sounded great. This is one that is often completely omitted from clone compatibility, so those of you with an original cart will have no worries at all on the Mega SG. For you guys that live and breathe your Everdrives, the Mega SG is compatible, though with a few concessions. First, Genesis and Mega Drive games play fine. I was able to load and play a great many games during my testing with no troubles at all. However, you lose both Master System and Game Gear compatibility. This means that if you play your Sega Master System games through your Genesis via the Everdrive, you will lose that ability on the Mega SG. Fortunately, the Mega SG does have Sega Master System ability through the cartridge adapter that it comes with. This works with the Everdrive for the Sega Master System as well. You can also enable games that have an FM soundtrack to use that feature by default, or turn it off completely. Unfortunately, my Sega Master System controllers did not work on the Mega SG. Perhaps the most surprising feature of the Mega SG is its ability to connect to a Sega CD and play that system's games. I tried a bunch of favorites and had no trouble at all. I ran these across on Model 1 and Model 2, the Mega SG working as it should with both. The Mega SG will work with whatever region Sega CD or Mega CD you have. Just be sure to have the proper region selected in the system settings. Sega CD games continue to be region protected, so keep that in mind. I also tried those shitty multi-carts that are splashed all over eBay and AliExpress. They fired up just fine, and even the bootleg hacks seem to play with no issues. At the end of the day, the question boils down to whether or not this thing is worth $200+. And make no mistake, with shipping it's $200+. That question is actually a lot more complicated than you may realize. For you casual guys that just want to play a few games here and there, the answer is no. The price will never beat free emulation. On the flip side, the purist will lament the differences in some games' sound and music, and so they are going to want to stick with their original hardware and CRTs. But what about the rest of the dedicated Genesis and Mega Drive fans looking for a modern way to play their favorite 16-bit games? This is where things get a bit cloudy. The Sega Genesis spanned 3 models that had numerous motherboard revisions. These models and revisions were not all created equal. Some of these, like the dreaded VA7, sound as bad as some of the at-games atrocities that have befallen the Sega faithful. My point is that many Genesis and Mega Drive fans have had different audio experiences based on what model and revision of the original hardware they were exposed to. The Mega SG kind of fits into this narrative, itself having its own feel to its audio experience. While some games sound brilliant, you will notice that others will sound a little different. The good news is that while these differences exist, future firmware updates will no doubt bring it closer and closer to the best it can be. I have faith Analogue will do us justice. The Mega SG is a solid product and one that definitely respects the legacy of one of gaming's greatest machines. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.